The Timeshift.
Hello and welcome along, I'm Chris Hall and this is The Timeshift, my sci-fi film fest, and it's great to have you with me as always. This week looking at the latest episode of Doctor Who entitled Heaven Sent. Now because this video is a little bit of a critique review kind of thing, this video is going to be spoiler heavy. So if you don't want this episode spoiled for you for whatever reason, it's best to switch this video off now. Okay, everybody ready, everybody geared up, let us dive headfirst into Heaven Sent. Ooh. Well, it's fair to say this week's episode of Doctor Who is a welcome change of pace to what we've had recently, as this is an episode which was consistent all the way through. Over the past couple of weeks we've had episodes which were average almost entirely until the ending, then all of a sudden the ending and holy shit, what the hell just happened? I mean, a couple of weeks ago we had evil sand people taking over the solar system. Last week we had Clara dying. Both great, amazing, epic endings. It's just a shame that they came at the end of episodes which were horribly average and very little else. This week we're treated to something decidedly different. An episode which is from start to end rather good, rather enjoyable, it has to be said. I still have a few issues here and there with them, which I'll get onto shortly. One of the things I'll definitely say to this episode's favour is that it is bold. Not because of its subject matter, but because of its function as an episode of Doctor Who. This week's episode didn't have a companion or anyone to really fill that void. In other adventures where the Doctor hasn't been accompanied by his established companion, there's always been someone else there to fill that role, even if they've just been there just to ask the questions the audience wants answering and nothing else. This week we don't get that because it's just the Doctor and the monster. There's no one else for the Doctor to play off or really to have any kind of exchanges with. We do have that weird bit with Clara in the back of his mind, which I'm not 100% certain about, to be honest with you. It was fine, it kind of filled that role, but at the same time didn't, which is an omiyori thing I have to say. But still, it proves that you can be bold and you can be interested with Doctor Who for two reasons. First of all, it's actually exploring the nature of the show of Doctor Who. Not exploring the mythos of the Doctor, not teasing us in that they're going to reveal his name, or that we're going to talk about the Doctor's childhood, or whether or not he can regenerate into a woman, or anything like that. It's actually looking at the mere function of Doctor Who as a TV show, which is something that Russell T Davies did a lot during his first series of Doctor Who, which is why that first series of New Doctor Who I always find that much more fascinating, as it's exploring the very nature of the show and its relationship with the monsters within it, which hasn't really been done thus far since then. This episode doesn't quite reach those same kind of heights, but it's at least exploring this nature of the companion and what they mean to the show in a way which hasn't really been done thus far, and I am a little bit bummed out that this episode didn't really explore more fully. And it also proves the importance of the companion character, as without that companion, even with the weird weirdy fictional version that that Doctor has of Clara in the back of his mind, that they're so vital to the nature of the show, because without them the show feels very stark and empty. I understand that was kind of the point with this week's episode, that you had to feel stark, that you had to feel empty, that you had to feel lonely for the Doctor, but without that character that we come to get to know, without that character who acts as that vessel for us to feel part of the adventure, for us to feel as though we experience these wonderful, these weird, these strange, adventurous, scary episodes, and these adventures in time and space, without that person for us to feel that we're experiencing this adventure via osmosis, it starts to feel a little bit more disconnected from us. And because there's no one else there to ask those questions, who's this, what's that, why does that function, what's the idea, where are we, what year is this, it then starts to feel a lot more strange and abstract than we had before. And when you look at any other episode of Doctor Who, this series, last series, 20, 30 years ago, that companion character, whoever that may be, has always asked those basic questions. Who's this? Where's this? What year is this? And those have always helped anchor us in some kind of reality and helped us through this adventure. This week we don't get that, so we're stark. We're left wondering where we are, and what's going on. Much like the Doctor themselves, so in a weird way it really works. But I'm glad that this isn't going to be the thing from now onwards, that this isn't certainly going to be the case of it. Because the role of the companion, regardless of what you like that companion at the time, is utterly vital to the function of the show. And this week's episode proves that, if nothing else. I did find the central mystery to this week's episode to be interesting, even if I did find the whole thing to be slightly inconsequential at the end of the day. Now, the only reason why I feel that, I have to say, is because I accidentally read a spoiler for this week's episode, and by extension next week's, that we're going back to Gallifrey. I read that in advance by accident. I didn't intend to, so as a result, this week's episode was spent me sat there pretty much waiting until we landed back on Gallifrey. I knew it was going to happen. It wasn't a big reveal to me, so the whole build to that felt a little bit weak to me. But that's only because I ballsed up and I read that in advance. That's not a slight on the episode itself. It's still interesting and fascinating. It's still great, the notion behind it. This whole idea that the Doctor is having to keep dying, having to keep going through this cycle over and over and over again. That he's going to go through the same sequence, he's going to go through the same rooms, but he's never going to know about it. He's never going to know about the sacrifice that the Doctor made for the Doctor. This whole an idea, all those deaths up to that point, he's never going to know about. He's always going to have this untold question at the back of his mind about where all these skulls came from, where those clothes came from, why is this shovel covered in dust and that kind of thing. He's never going to know that, which I find to be weird but at the same time fascinating. And it just occurred to me then, the first time the Doctor arrived there and he went through this sequence, he'll have done it naked, because in order for the clothes to be there for him to find after chucking himself into the water, he must have had to take the wet clothes off and then continued on. So that means there was at least one time where he did it naked. And there must have been one time where he died in the grave in order for him to write the in number 12 thing. which I'm fine with to a certain degree, because it all makes sense with him having to die so many times over. I didn't hate this week's episode. The only reason why I found it inconsequential was the fact that I saw the spoiler in advance. That doesn't forgive one aspect of the episode that I didn't like, though, which is the fact that when you take the mystery away, when you take the fact this episode is building up to going back to Gallifrey, if you know that in advance, there's not really much else to this week's episode. The good episodes of Doctor Who, the episodes that really work for me, are the ones which are more multifaceted. Where the episodes where you have when you have the central mystery, even if you can guess what the ending is, there's still the adventure, there's still the banter, there's still the excitement. Did I really use the word banter? Bloody hell. There's still the interesting monster, there's still an idea, a moral message behind it. With this week's episode, there is no moral message, there is no idea behind it, there is nothing on a cerebral level, there's nothing on an intellectual standpoint for me to really get my fingers dirty with. There is no real interesting monster. The monster was okay. I didn't like its hands, which is a second time in this year's series where I've had an issue with a monster's hands, which feels very weird to me. So, monster is okay, but hands a little bit weird. The episode itself, fine, interesting, great. It felt inconsequential to me because because I knew about the twist at the end in advance. And there was nothing else really there to really gear me up, really. There was nothing else to really gauge to sustain my interest for a great period of time. Peter Capaldi is still great as Doctor Who. I'm doing the performance-y bit now because for this week we're not doing the performance section because it's totally pointless in me doing that. Peter Capaldi, great, fantastic as always. There is this slight issue, this slight erring in the back of my mind, which I feel that his whole shtick now in Doctor Who is just delivering big speeches, because he delivered this big interesting monologue at the start of the thing, and that's fine. He delivered a big speech last week and the week before, and these are all great and amazing, but a little bit less grandstanding, please. Please, a little bit less grandstanding. I understand you're great, I understand you're fantastic, but I don't need to see you deliver a speech to understand that you're a great actor. I really don't need that. You're still fantastic, you're still great, you're still brilliant, you could still possibly potentially be my all-time favourite Doctor Who, but a little bit less grandstanding, please. A little less speeches. I'm perfectly fine when you're delivering it whilst doing something else, like in this week's episode you're punching a wall made of diamond as though you're in a game of Minecraft or something, but a little bit less of that, please. Now, in a slight change of pace, like I say, not going to do the performance section now, let us have a few predictions as to what is going to happen next week. This will either be crushingly disappointing, or I will just be crushingly disappointingly right. If that even makes proper grammatical sense. Oh dear. Okay, so prediction time. Predictions for what's going to happen next week. Now, If you have your own predictions as what you think is going to happen next week, leave a comment in the comment section down below, and we'll all find out next Saturday whether or not we're right. So we'll start off with the big thing that stuck out to me in the Next Time on Doctor Who trailer bit was the point where the Gallifreyan soldier guy is saying, "Someone has initiated the regeneration protocols," and then you have the shot of the door of the TARDIS. Now, of course, for people that actively try to avoid the Next Time trailer bits, yeah, I've spoiled that for you, but I did warn you about spoilers at the start of the episode. Now, I don't think for 1 minute that regeneration thing is going to be the Doctor. I think that the framing of the person saying the regeneration thingy and then showing the TARDIS doors, that's a red herring. That glowing bit with the TARDIS doors, I think that will be the Doctor seeing somebody. Someone will appear through that doors. I have this sinking suspicion that it may be Clara. I have this feeling that at some point in the episode the Doctor is going to almost hijack a Gallifreyan health station, I don't know, whether hospital or something like that, and he's going to attempt to resurrect Clara. As she was just an unwitting pawn in all this, he's going to try and bring her back to life, which may or may not have unwanted consequences, I don't know. I don't for 1 minute believe that Peter Capaldi is going to die in this week's episode, or he's going to regenerate in any form. He's not going to do the cop-out like we had with David Tennant, where he got shot by a Dalek and he just so happens to put the regeneration juice in a foot or a hand or whatever it was. You know, like that episode where he was first introduced, that Christmas special, where he got his hand or his knee or whatever it shot off, and he managed to regenerate it back as if by magic. Lazy script writing magic brought his hand back. And then we had the evil, not so evil version of the Doctor, the alternate unit. I'm going off on a tangent now, probably shouldn't do, but whatever. I don't think that's going to happen with next week's episode. Capaldi's not going to regenerate. We're not going to losing him, and I know this for a fact because we've seen the promotional material for the Christmas special. So he's not going to get killed off. They won't have gone to all that time and effort to stage those pictures. They really wouldn't have done. I don't for 1 minute believe that the Doctor is going to be the one that's going to regenerate. It'll probably be one of the other Time Lords, probably the old as fuck looking one. He'll have to regenerate for reasons which will become apparent next week. Maybe the reason why they've called him to Gallifrey is because they want to steal his regeneration cycle, the Doctor. Maybe the other Time Lords have lost the ability to regenerate, so they're kidnapping the Doctor to steal that ability from him so they can regenerate their regeneration cycle. I believe the reason for the Time Lords bringing the Doctor to Gallifrey is for some nefarious purpose or another, as almost it invariably is with them at the moment. Or alternatively, the person using the whole regeneration thingy may be a shielder who is back next week. But you never know, she may be using it for some purpose. Maybe she feels guilty for Clara's death and is going to regenerate into her. In any case, if she is going to be the one using it, I hope she regenerates into somebody who can act. Or maybe the whole regeneration thing is just a red herring, or it's just there for entirely superfluous reasons. Maybe it's just there so we can see a male Time Lord regenerate into a female Time Lord, just so that Stephen Moffat can stick two fingers up to the fanboys who really don't want that to happen with the Doctor or something. I really don't know. As for the whole hybrid thing, that great compelling mystery that's been really at the forefront of our minds for the entirety of this season, maybe the reason why the Time Lords brought the Doctor to Gallifrey is to use the hybrid for some nefarious purpose. There's that word again, nefarious, there for a third time. They want to use the hybrid to get revenge on the Daleks or something, to utilise its evil, unstoppable power to destroy them once and for all, or maybe to use the hybrid to destroy the Doctor once and for all. They want to destroy somebody. Who's they going to destroy? They've got to kill somebody! Or alternatively, maybe the hybrid isn't a mix of Time Lord and Dalek DNA. Maybe the whole hybrid thing is something more metaphorical, referring to someone who has the intelligence of a Time Lord but the destructive capabilities of a Dalek, you know, kind of like the Doctor in a way. I know that he does say at the end of this week's episode, the hybrid is me, or something along those lines. I don't think they'll just leave that as being the big reveal. I suppose that it'll be revealed next week exactly what it is, but I don't expect it to be something literally physical. I imagine it to be something more philosophical, something a bit more clever and a little bit more witty than that. That it will be the Doctor will be the hybrid, but it won't be him literally being a mix of two different races. It'll still be a Time Lord, it'll just be something a little bit more metaphorical or something like that. Or maybe it's just a shielder bollocksing things up yet again, and the Doctor maybe has to deal with her. Maybe she is the hybrid all along and she destroys Gallifrey or part of it, and then the Doctor has to deal with her. Maybe, I really don't know. If the big reveal at the end of the day is something to do with a shielder, I will be sorely disappointed. But enough speculations, let us go to the overview on what I thought as a whole of this week's episode. Okay, so what I thought as a whole of this week's episode. I thought it to be fine, perfectly fine. I would have enjoyed it a lot more had I not accidentally read spoilers about it a couple of weeks in advance, but it was great for what it was. There's only slight nitpicky things that stopped me from liking it as much. A slightly clumsily designed monster at the end of the day. There not really being anything else in the episode apart from the build-up for next week, but that's all fine. I am slightly apprehensive about next week's episode, not because of the whole mystery side of things, but the fact that it's going to have to pack a lot into it. We're going to have to get the explanation as to why the Doctor was called to Gallifrey, why the Time Lords allowed Clara to die, what the hybrid really is, what the consequences of the hybrid are going to be, what's the thing with Missy and the hybrid Dalek Time Lords, are they going to factor into this at all? How is Gallifrey now back? How exactly is it in this universe? Or maybe it's in a different universe or something like that. We're going to spend a lot of next week with exposition, which puts me at slight unease, as at the end of the series we want something a bit more zesty, a little more energetic, a little more boisterous, which is a weird thing to say, not because I really want more of Doctor Who, but I have a feeling that things in next week's episode are going to feel as though they need a little bit more explaining. So we really need an extra episode after next week's episode in order to wrap things up a lot more neatly. Over the past this week and last week, we've had 2 episodes which are fairly independent of one another. You could argue that we're in the middle of a 3-parter right now, but it's kind of very iffy, almost tenuously linked between each one of them. Next week's episode is going to feel fairly crammed and fairly ashamedly ashore. But of course, what do you think? Did you enjoy this week's episode? Did you love it? Did you hate it? And what do you think will happen in next week's? How do you think this is all going to pan out? Is the hybrid thing going to be a crushing disappointment or merely a horrible disappointment? Let me know in the comment section whichever web zone you're watching this on, and I shall be back next week to discuss the final episode of this year's series. It's come along very quickly. Maybe it's as a result of the whole 2-parter thing, but whatevs. I'll be back next week. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.